Hello, my name is Michelle, and you're listening to Profit is a Choice. Joining us today is Valerie Leonard. Valerie is a financial advisor with Grinkmeyer Leonard Financial out of Alabama. Valerie's mission is to help people be the best they can be, making the most of their financial resources. She's married to Rob, who owns Shutterlux, which is a retailer of hard window treatments. She has 3 young children, and she loves to volunteer at her church and in her community, helping women and families create personal financial plans for their future. Valerie is such a delight to talk with, and I know that you're even going to hear that just in our conversation. She has an amazing heart for serving other people and for really helping them use the resources that they have to enrich their lives today and for the future. So on our podcast today, we're going to really talk about priority. That's a main thread that runs through the entire conversation. And to really have a plan or a goal that we can dig into, whether it's for our home or for our business, identifying and understanding the driver of what our priorities are is a must. So as you listen in today, consider your priorities and see if they are supporting you or if they need to shift. Every day, empowered entrepreneurs are taking ownership of their company financial health and enjoying the rewards of reduced stress and more creativity. With my background as a financial software developer, owner of multiple businesses in the interior design industry, educator, and speaker, I coach women in the interior design industry to increase their profits, regain ownership of their bottom line, and to have fun again in their business. Welcome to Profit is a Choice. Hey, Valerie, I'm so glad you're with us today.
Hey, Michelle, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And I hate that our listeners can't see you like I can. You always make me smile because you come to every time we ever talk to me, you come with a big smile on your face and with hope. And I appreciate that.
Well, I come by that honestly. I can thank my mom for that. She's always a shining light out there. So grew up around it.
That's awesome. Well, it shows. Valerie, I want to introduce you a little bit more to our listeners. You know, we've already done your bio introduction, but I just want to let them know how you and I met and why I think it's so special, because I think it also helps set the scene for our conversation today. So we met, 3-4 years ago at IWCE. I think you were pregnant. You were with your little one. Or no, yes, you had just had your baby.
I just had a baby. I had a baby on my neck.
Yes, she was strapped and wrapped all to you. And you were there with your husband, Rob, who is the owner of Shutterlux in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. He does blind shades and shutters. You were there with him going through the education and keeping that sweet little girl near you. And we met.
Yes.
And, it just really struck up a really great friendship. I started working with your husband and coaching him. And then through that, ended up working with you and your business partners, and then just developing a friendship.
Yeah. And I'm so excited. Thank you so much for having me today. I feel like there is no better person to launch a podcast. You've got so much to offer this big world. And I know firsthand, you know my background. I'm a financial advisor by trade. And then obviously you've worked with Rob, like you said. But you've had a huge impact on my business. You've had a huge impact on me personally. You've offered me parenting advice from time to time. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that you always keep your priorities straight. I love everything you have to say because I know where you stand at all times. And I think there's no better way for anybody out there looking to improve themselves or go out there and chase their hopes and their dreams than to start with what their priorities are. And you've gotten that right. And I'm so excited to be a part of this.
Oh, thank you. You know, I will say this. I work hard to have my priorities right. I have certainly messed it up along the way and had to stop and realign because sometimes, and you know this, you're a business owner. Your husband is a business owner. So 2 businesses, you have 3 children, and you work full time. You're a busy woman. And so you spend time at church, you give back to the community. You have a lot of things you're involved in, just like I do. And it is easy to get out of balance and think that something that's not important is most important because it's screaming at you in that moment. And right. You know, I think age has done a lot for me in that. And honestly, really thinking about what has a long-term effect and what matters at the end. Mm-hmm. And and constantly asking myself, what can I take off my list so that I can add something else? What if I want to do this new thing or add this, something's got to go, and not feeling like it all gets piled on. In my younger days, I just kept piling on until I wanted to break. And now I go, that's fine. If I'm going to do this, this has to leave. Like kind of like leftovers in the fridge. If I'm putting something else in, something's got to get out.
You've definitely got to know how to say no with grace. That's for sure.
That's exactly right. So I want to jump in, Valerie, and have you tell everybody a little bit about your business. What is it that you do as a financial advisor? And who do you focus on? Like, who's your, we'll say ideal target market, whatever. But who is it that you really love serving?
Yeah. So my financial advisory firm is very unique and different from, I would say, most financial practices out there. I have built the business from the ground up. I am a wife, like you say. I am a mom. And I feel like my clients instinctively know that I can relate to them because in a lot of cases I've been where they've been. And, I've got the experience with marketing. I've worked the 90-hour work weeks. I know how to manage employees. And I understand that cash flow is really, a problem for most businesses. It's a real struggle, and that sometimes debt is necessary in order to grow. And from a profitability standpoint, it's a lot easier to talk about profitability than it is to achieve it. And so I've been in the trenches alongside all my clients the entire time I've been in business, and I'm really on a mission to improve the way that hardworking Americans think about their money, the way they think about their time, the way they look at their future and their hopes and dreams. And I think my industry, unfortunately, is notorious for saying all the right things. They promise to make money for people. They bury fees in general. And a lot of times they don't have proactive communication with their clients. And so my job really is to make sure that my clients understand what they need to know to make informed decisions. In a lot of cases, I hold their hand through all the decisions that they have to make. I try really hard to speak in terms that they understand, speak their language. And so I work with business owners in a lot of cases, just like you do. I know you and I have really much of the same mindset. We've always jived really well in our thought processes. So a lot of times I'll work with business owners who want to start or want to have a retirement plan. Maybe it's that they have personal investments or they want to start investing and they need some help figuring out how to do that. I offer life insurance and long-term care insurance and really look at things from the big picture. And then I've also got a menu of services where I can help identify my clients' priorities and then offer them services that are meaningful for them. Whereas most financial advisors try to look at financial planning from a comprehensive standpoint, I'm going to, sit there and say, well, what is it that you really need? And where are you today? Because we got to figure out where you are today in order to get you to where you're going. And so I think it's a different approach, and it's exciting. I try hard to make it meaningful. So my ideal client, it's funny. I work with a lot of busy people, and I found that most of my clients, if you kind of look at the common denominator between them, they are busy people who are highly intelligent and they just don't have time or maybe even the desire to manage their own investments or to figure out, are they on track for retirement? So that's, to me, my ideal client is somebody that values my advice and, they want to prioritize their financial goals and they really plan to work hard at it.
I love that. From what I do as a business coach, it is certainly not a financial advisor, but I do a lot of advising on their finances, not with regard to where to invest it or anything, but how to come up with the money in the company so that then they can go work with the financial advisor to know what to do with it. And so I do know there is an overlap, but I see it more as we're both supporting that client to do the right thing in the same thing. So I'm in the middle of expenses within the company, and I'm sure you probably do some of that as well, but really you can't have retirement if you don't have any money to put in it. So how do we create systems and processes and reduction of expenses so that you have money to put into a retirement account. Now go talk with your financial advisor. I mean, I can even tell you how many times I say to my clients, I am not your accountant, I'm not your bookkeeper, and I'm not your financial advisor, but I'm going to show you in your company what you need to do and give you the information so you can go talk to them to do what they do best. So it's kind of like you, I'm holding their hand all the way through that because it is scary. If it's not your area of focus, it can be very daunting and overwhelming and scary. And there's a lot of shame that comes with not understanding it as a business owner. And I know my goal is to go in and just eradicate. I can't eradicate your poverty if I can't eradicate your bad mindset, or a mindset that's not supportive of where you want to go. And I know you do a lot of the same. You tell us a little bit about, I know you work and offer really special events in your area. You're in around the Birmingham area of Alabama. Right. And you offer all kinds of special events that are for women to come in where you kind of demystify personal finances. Tell us about that and give us a little bit of understanding of what you do there. Because I love that. I love just that, hey, here's a cup of coffee. Let's sit down and let me just take away the fear on this.
Right. So I think to understand my events, you have to understand kind of the theme of my events, which is, it's called Wisdom and Sense, CENTS. So I value especially the older generation or people who have gone before us when it comes to really anything business, anything life related. My goal with these events is to take wisdom that I've learned through my clients who've been there, done that, through mentors that I really look up to and respect, through my own personal experiences, through my faith and my own walk with God, and to take all that information and help simplify it and break it down into meaningful, actionable items that the average person can go out there and implement in their life. And so Wisdom and Sense is all about educating and really trying to make the most of every single decision that you make and know that you've got knowledge that truly matters. And so I do monthly Wisdom and Sense women's events. And that stemmed from the fact that the very first client that I ever met with was a 76-year-old woman who I sat at her kitchen table for about an hour and a half, and we talked finances for about 5 minutes. The rest of the time, she literally cried because her husband of 50 plus years had just passed away, and she didn't know how to pick up the pieces from a financial perspective. And she had a beautiful story, beautiful life with her husband. And it just really had an impact on me from the perspective of, I want to help this woman. And my life's goal from that point forward has been to make a difference and to make it meaningful. And so if you look at all the studies about women and finances, what you'll find is that as really young girls, we're confident. We're confident about our futures. We like math. We like science. And there's numerous studies that show that once we get to high school, the boys take over. We're not supposed to be good at math, is what our society tells us. And so by the time you get to college, it's less than 30% of women are engineers. And so what I have found is that as women, a lot of times we're dancing backwards in high heels. We're trying to juggle. We're trying to be moms. We're trying to manage our household, manage our businesses. And a lot of times we rely on our husbands to manage the finances. Or we say, there will come a time in my life when I have time to focus on this, but today is not the day. Or maybe it's just that I don't get that and it's not my thing and I'll never get it. I just don't have the confidence that I can understand it, so I'm just going to ignore it. And so the whole goal behind these events and behind my social media efforts is to just empower women to understand that, yes, you can get this. And you don't have to know every single detail. You don't have to know the mechanics of, what a balance sheet looks like, both personally or professionally. But you've got to know enough to make wise decisions. And that's where I can help educate, you to do that.
Okay, so you're singing my song because I'm on that exact same path on my side doing the same thing. And I'm just sitting here, I feel what you're saying because I remember being I've always loved math. I was that student in class, and I've told it to people before, that the teacher said, you can't subtract 3 from 2. And I raised my hand and said, yes, you can. You get -1. And then I kind of got quieted. I was pulled out of all of the curves for math in class because I got it. I understood. My dad taught me base 8 and base 16 as a little girl. I'm adding and subtracting letters, and my friends are trying to learn to multiply. I got it. And I distinctly remember being in a math class in college and being told that the boys were going to do better than the girls in that class. And it made me so angry, so furious, that I stood up and said, bring it on. I will have the highest grade in this class as a woman. Watch. And I did. It was like, don't tell me I can't do it when I absolutely know that I can. But I've watched a lot of my fellow friends and women, and have had multiple conversations even this week with women who were told, oh, you don't get math. Oh, women don't get math. You get social studies and language and writing, and the boys get, and I'm sitting here thinking to myself, maybe it's our age range, right? I'm hoping that's not what they're still teaching, but that's the age range of the majority of women that are now in business, owning their companies. And they're not looking at their numbers and their financials because they have in their mind that they can't do math.
Right.
Yet you and I both know, because you know this industry with a husband who has a blind store. Just like I do, they do math all day, every day. I say it on probably every podcast I've put out there. Scale, proportion, yardage, linear feet. I mean, we are calculating and doing math, whether we know we are. And if we can do that, we certainly can have an understanding of our business financials and of our personal financials. We just need somebody to guide us on here's what to look for and here's how to do it.
And let's face it, we don't have to all be good at everything. I mean, if you're good at sales, if you're good at interacting with your customers, that's great. But surround yourself with people that are competent in other areas. That's what I've tried to do in my life. And honestly, I attribute that to my success, because I cannot know everything, and I don't want to know everything. I want to stay in my lane. I want to do what I'm good at. And if I can put people, there's a great book out there, Good to Great. Jim Collins wrote it.
Love it.
And he talks about how when you're in business, you've got to find the right people and put them in the right seats in the bus and get the wrong people off of the bus. And that's the only way you're going to head in the right direction. And I truly believe that. And so I think that's why, I look at my CPA. I'm in this business and I do numbers every day, but I cannot imagine doing my own tax return. I absolutely can't. I understand it. I get it. I can, help my clients with that. But I don't want to file a tax return because that is not my gig.
I'm the same way. I do numbers all day. I look at them all day. I help my clients look at them and interpret them. I work with their accountants and their financial advisors. I have my own accountant, my own financial advisor, because sometimes even being so close to it blurs decision making.
Absolutely.
And so I want another voice that, like we had even talked before we came on, we're kind of hubs in our little areas. You're the hub that helps your clients on the personal side work with their lawyer, work with maybe another insurance company, or work with their accountant or bookkeeper or whatever. And I'm doing the same thing over here. I'm not trying to take the place of an accountant, a bookkeeper, or a financial, advisor. They've got their area of expertise, and I've got mine. But we're all trying to work together in concert with our clients to get them where they want to go. That's that feeling of, and I love WCAA, the hashtag, never alone. We're never in business alone. And that's Good to Great's telling us that we can't do it alone. You will be stagnant, you'll be stuck, and you can't be expert at everything. But you need to understand it as the business owner to know when you're being taken or to know when you're being supported.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you absolutely have that right.
So I know that we both also work and help on the personal side, because let's be honest, show me a business where the business finances are a mess, and I can show you a home where home finances are a mess. And so it is very often that if I'm working with somebody right now, one of my business clients, to create a home budget, simply because their business budget is going to flow into the home budget. And we've got to make sure that they're supporting each other. I don't have to do that all the time. That's not like my number one goal is, can I help you create a home budget? I know you enjoy that probably a little more than I do. But it happens, just like you have to go backwards sometimes. I've shared with the listeners on other podcasts, my husband and I taught Dave Ramsey at our church in January through the spring. We taught that to about 14 people that came through. And really, the principles are so well founded. And I personally love that they're founded on scripture, which is what I think is solid. And so I can feel like if they're telling me to do it, it felt solid. But even 25 years ago, right after my husband and I are getting ready to have our 28th wedding anniversary, and 25 years ago, we went through a financial course at our church by Ron Blue. And just really, they're all kind of similar. They have a little bit of a different view, but they're all pretty similar. Tell us about the one that you've been teaching and sharing. And I've got books by him, but I'll let you tell who he is and what you're doing with that.
Yeah, so the first quarter of this year, I taught a class, about 100 people. It was a Crown Financial study. And the whole premise behind the study is that how we handle money impacts our fellowship with God, and that money and possessions compete with the Lord for the first place in our lives. And so I'm the same way. I can look at someone's budget. I just did it yesterday, sitting at their kitchen table, and I can tell exactly where their priorities are by looking at their expenses. And I'm a big believer that, there's so many different ways to budget. Let's face it. You can do the Dave Ramsey way. You can do the Crown Financial way. You can do the zero-based budget way, which is one that I typically like to share with people. But at the end of the day, what this really comes down to are those priorities. And so we've got to figure out, before we can even establish a budget, what is it that we're trying to achieve? Do we want to spend more time with our family? Is that what's important to us? Do we want to be able to fund trips in retirement to take our grandkids to Disney World? Is that what we're trying to do? Or are we, just in the mindset of, I'll pack money away and I'll figure it out later? And no matter what the goal is, and no matter, where you stand, it's, to me, extremely important to start with those priorities. And so, I generally will start with, okay, let's start with savings first. Whether you have zero savings or whether you've already accumulated quite a bit of wealth, we need to start there. And then, if you're a person that ties to your church, we need to build that into the budget. And then, you basically work backwards, in my mind, to get your finances in line and your habits in line, with how much money you have. So if you make $30,000 a month on average, but you're not used to factoring taxes into that, then you need to change your language. You need to say, you know what? No, I really only make $17,000 a month once my quarterly estimates have been set aside. And so I think a lot of this is just changing the way we think and changing our attitude about the language we speak in many cases.
Yeah. And I know you and I have taught profit first. We have put profit first into play in some of your businesses when we work together. And of course, adjusted it. It's just like any budget and any plan. It's very similar to all the others for the business side, but it has to be adjusted. It's not a plug and play. You've got to think about, what are the priorities? How does money come in? When do you recognize income? But the beautiful thing about all of these plans is they really make you stop and look at the priority. I don't care which one of these you choose, any of the budgeting plans. When you come face to face with where you're really spending your money and where it's really going, you have a decision. Is that where I want it to go? And if not, I'm raising the flag for, our money doesn't tell us what to do. We tell it what to do. We have ownership. We have choices. That's why this is called Profit as a Choice. You've talked about our decisions. And as well as I do, Valerie, the decisions we make today have a big, long-lasting impact on 20 years down the road. I just got in my 401k document from where I worked 20 years ago and looked at that account where I had put money in for 10 years while I worked corporate. And I'm watching it grow. I've not touched that particular 401k. I have others in IRAs, from where I've been on my own. But I'm watching that one account from 10 years ago, and it blows me away because it's been compounding. And I didn't make what I make now, at the beginning of that journey, right out of college. first thing I did is they told me I had to write down the beneficiary, which no 21-year-old wants to hear on their first job. I'm like, what? I'm just getting started and you want me to tell you who? Okay, whatever. So a beneficiary, and I signed up for 401k the minute I was eligible at my company. And that one thing, I am seeing a huge impact now, even though that one fund hasn't been touched in 20 years.
Yeah. And we can't let money get in the way of fulfilling our purpose. I think you asked me before our conversation today, what does profitability mean to you? And so I think this is a great question, especially from my perspective, because I've had a front row seat to so many successful people. And in our society, in our culture, in the business world, we define profitability as having a positive financial gain. So you think about everything that you make and then everything that you spend and your taxes, and what's left over is your profit. I'll tell you from experience, to me, profitability is more than just earnings less expenses. It's really about what lies in your heart. And I think we're so often taken captive by this world, and we think about what the world says, what our friends say about money and how they live their lifestyle and how they act. And, we develop our definition of profitability based off of our own experiences with other people. And so, in my mind, when you think about your impact on this world and the things that make you get out of bed in the morning and that excite you and that keep business fun for you, you've got to think in many respects about allocating your energy in a way that reveals your top priorities, and allocating your time in a way that reveals your top priorities. And so much of that has to do with money, but we can't let that get in the way of what we're meant to do. And so I think, profitability means so much more than just dollars and cents, and it all has to be tied together. Okay.
So in the very first podcast, so for anybody who hasn't listened, it's the 000 podcast that talks about just why I even launched it. And it's exactly for that reason, because I'm all about making money. We have to make money because that's what we have to use, the currency we have to use to live in this world. Mm-hmm. But it's about conscious profits and about the idea that to be profitable is about, look, I consider myself profitable if I raise 2 adult men who love the Lord, take care of their families, and do well by the people that they meet, and take care of their country and their land. You know what I mean? To me, I'm profitable if I can raise great adults. Notice I didn't say big children, great adults. That makes me profitable. If I can have a marriage where I love my husband and he loves me and we support each other, I consider myself profitable. If I have great friends that I can communicate with, employees, whatever, colleagues, and we are supportive and we're going through, I consider myself profitable. I had 3 podcasters who have been on this show. All 3 of them supported me when I launched. Not one of them pushed back at me. Not one of them said there's no space. Not one of them did any of that. I consider that profitable. And so every single, and those things matter more to me than a couple of dollars at the bottom. We still got to have that money, but that money's not my driver, right? All the other decisions are the driver. The money is just the result of all those decisions.
And here we are talking about results. So if you think about that, and from a business perspective, we're kind of talking about sales. We're talking about our top line.
Sure.
But we can't neglect that bottom line. You've mentioned that here a few times. What is it that makes you profitable? And that's managing those expenses. That's managing those times, your time. That's saying no to the things that you just possibly can't do. And to me, that's where you start your financial plan. You start, obviously, you look at your income, your expenses, and then you build from there. So yeah, that good stuff.
I know. And that's why when people, kind of pull back from profits, from the numbers, I'm going to say from the hard numbers that are attached, and they call me and they want to talk about, I'm not making money. They're really kind of shocked. I might say, let me see your balance sheet and your profit and loss. But that's not always where we start. And I think it kind of shocks them because they're like, well, I just want you to fix that number. And that number is just, representative of everything that happened above it, of your mindset, of all of that. So from your perspective, what mindsets do you think prevent us from being profitable? Or you can tell us mindsets that you think help make us profitable. Either way.
Well, For me and my business, it's a little bit of different perspective than in the window covering industry. And I think that's good. I think sometimes you got to look at other businesses and see what they're doing and get kind of out of your, your comfort zone. But in my business, it's spending quality time with my clients because that adds value to their lives. And in turn, that makes me more profitable. I have to look at the quality of advice that I'm offering my clients, which means I've got to spend my time educating myself. I've got to stay up to date on technology. I've got to look at, latest trends. I've got to do my investment research. I've got to think about innovative ideas that are out there, which again means my clients are going to be more successful and they're going to be more willing to refer their friends and family to me. So, there's so many different ways that you can look at this. And I look at the fact that, hey, if my husband, Rob, sells a house full of shutters to a customer, and he only looks at the cost that he pays to buy those shutters from Hunter Douglas, and he doesn't consider the cost of his installers, he doesn't consider the utilities that are associated with his design center, he doesn't think about his business liability insurance or the amount that he spends on taking empty boxes to the landfill, he eventually will not have a business, right?
Right.
I mean, so it's kind of like you think about the fact that, could you imagine if the CEO of Walmart showed up to his board meeting and said, you know what, next year for 2019, we're not going to do a budget. We're not going to look at these things because we're just going to wing it. That would be crazy. That would be ludicrous. And so
but we do that every day. We do it every day, both personally and in our own creative business. We are out there swinging from a wire and we have no safety net under us.
Right. And in the cases where we do have a budget, how often do we have a budget, but we don't compare what we actually spend to our budget? I know I feel like, not to knock on CPAs because there's a lot of great CPAs out there, but one of the beefs I have is that CPAs in my mind have generally not been proactive in planning with their clients. They're often reactive. So you take your stuff to your tax advisor. They prepare your return, you get it back, and there's no, hey, here's what you should be doing differently for this next year to try to minimize your tax liability. And so tracking those expenses is as equally as important as having a budget. And it's not all that hard. There's so much technology out there that will do the majority of it for you these days. But yeah, so I would say, when you think about profitability, you've got to think about that top line and that bottom line, period.
So I've had some of the same experiences with CPAs that you have that were not consultative in nature. They literally just took the numbers that we gave them, plugged them in, and moved on. In episode 6, Christy Lott, who is my CPA, is much like you. She's of the same mindset that we are. So she is very forward thinking. She wants to meet with her clients 3 to 4 times a year and make a plan. And I know she's worked with my financial analyst. I've had all of them on the phone together, talking and working in concert for me and for my husband and where we want to go. And I do think that is important, that you build a team that is looking for where you want to go, not just handling where you are today. And right. I mentioned to you too, that's the reason I built the Understanding Your Financials course. It literally teaches how to create a budget. I mean, and it really is not hard. You can take a P&L from prior years and dump it into a spreadsheet, and it now becomes your budget. And now you just start adjusting it. And then I teach metrics on why you should look at it. Because you just mentioned a budget is only as good as we're going back and reviewing it and letting it really dictate our priorities. To do it and then put it on the shelf and say it's done for the year, well, it's no better if the Walmart guy did that than if he didn't create one at all, because it's not useful.
Yeah. And, I think the hardest thing about owning a business, managing a business, running a business, whatever you want to call it, obviously getting started is hard. But once you get started, to me, the hardest thing is managing your cash flow. And I've worked with all kinds of different business owners in different industries. And what I've found is it doesn't matter if you've been in business for 40 years, you still have cash flow issues. Mm-hmm. That is always the number one issue that I hear over and over and over. And yes, industries change, economies change. There's going to be ups and downs in your business, but it all comes back to cash flow. And you have to understand that there's nothing that can kill your business faster than not having a plan. I tell my clients all the time that we always start with the foundation of the house. So budget is important, but cash reserve is equally as important. If you do not have a rainy day fund, then you need a strategy to develop one, That's true both from a business perspective and that's true from a personal perspective. And so, we've got to, again, build that foundation of our house so that it's strong, so that no matter what comes at us, we can handle it. We can weather the storm.
I had that conversation with my oldest son last night, and, he's in the adult world making his own money, has his account set up. I sat down and did Dave Ramsey with him this summer. So not that he hadn't already seen us live that way, but, he needed to get things set up for himself. And even on the business side with the Profit First, we have the vault. The goal is to have 3 months. Some of the companies that are similar to Rob's with the blind shade shutters, there is a huge, for them more than anybody else, because interior designers a lot of times tend to take all their money up front or 75% up front for custom orders. But they don't do that quite as often on the blind shade shutter side. And then they have huge payouts and a long wait for the money to come back in. And if they are, right? And if they are working through, I'm just going to say big box stores, it can be months for that money to come in that they've already earned. And so what I see, a lot of them, especially those that are not doing residential, but doing more commercial, because they are doing such big volume. And many times they're only paid maybe product cost at the beginning. And so they're holding all those other costs. If cash flow is king, it can ruin. And so a lot of them have lines of credit and they're borrowing and putting it back and borrowing and putting it back. And I go in and teach them how to create their own line of credit to borrow from themselves, to build that up instead of taking it all out, build it up so that you can borrow from yourself. You're not paying interest, you're floating the money. And if anybody were to come call out a line of credit, they can call it, they can call it at any time. Even if you're up to date, even if you've paid on time, they can decide tomorrow that you don't get that anymore. And so if you don't have those reserves that you're talking about in your company, you can be wiped out in a day. Yeah.
And you think about, scripture even tells us that in order to get to where you want to go, sometimes it takes slow and steady prodding. Sometimes it's just a simple act of making a decision to do it and making it a priority. But no matter what your situation, you got to have that plan. You've got to figure out, okay, is my plan working? Do I need to adjust my plan? So it's a constant moving target, and you got to be okay with that. And I think that most people get into financial planning in some shape, form, or fashion, and the plan doesn't go exactly how they plan, so they give up on it. Well, that's where having somebody on your side that holds you accountable and that reminds you, wait a minute, look at your progress, look at where you are today. And this is just a hiccup in the grand scheme of things. There's another way. There's always another way.
I had a client that we were working a couple of weeks ago, and she was feeling like she wasn't making the money. Notice what I said, feeling like she wasn't making the money, feeling like she didn't have the money to come into her home to spend. And I sat down with her, and we'd been coaching. And of course, when we first started, all of her finances were in a shoebox. Not even kidding, right? That's just where they were. And I'm sure there are others that are like that. So we got her on QuickBooks, got her set up with CPAs and bookkeepers, got everything cleared up. Anyway, I said, let's pull up your profit and loss sheet. And when we pulled it up, and we pulled up her balance sheet, she had been parsing out money to go to college fund, parsing out money to go to retirement. And she didn't in her mind realize that was her salary and income. She just had given it a job to do. And so, of course, she's feeling like she had less. And when I sat down and said, here's what you've made, total sales. But as you said, here's what you've made net profit. Now let's go to the balance sheet. Here's what it's covering. She's like, well, I'm doing all right. I'm like, you're doing more than all right. You're already above the budget we'd set for you. You're already ahead of schedule. It doesn't feel like it because the money went to taxes. It went to retirement. It went to a college fund, and then it came home. Now, you can change your priorities if you need more at home, but it's going to come from one of these buckets. Where do you want to take it from? And then she was like, oh, no. I'm happy like it is. I now understand. Leave it where it is. So it wasn't that she wasn't making money. She just wasn't aware. She had created it and then kind of let it kind of go through her process, and really didn't stop to go look at the balance sheet to go, I'm doing all right.
Yeah, and I would be willing to bet that she probably had just come out of her situation with an employee who'd made her mad, and she realized she was spending too much money on them, and it became an emotional decision, or some other scenario similar to that. Where that's these emotional things that we go through as business owners and as human beings can really skew our judgment. I mean, we could spend days on the stories that I could tell you about bad decisions my clients have made and things they've learned from them, thankfully. But yeah, I mean, you've got to have some way to balance the emotions of all this.
Absolutely. So I want to shift gears just a little bit, Valerie. I know something that is very near and dear to your heart is, especially with a focus towards women and financials, not just short-term, but long-term on their personal side, is insurance and having enough insurance. And I want to make sure we have time on the podcast today to talk about that, because I know that it's super important to you, and I've shared with you, a personal experience with that. So can you just tell us a little bit about insurance, why we need to have it, and your thoughts on women and insurance?
Yeah, so I think so many times we undervalue ourselves and the impact that we have on those around us. If you look at my Wisdom and Sense Facebook page, I actually just posted something the other day about what mom is really worth. So in order to replace mom, and you think about all the jobs she does, whether it's cleaning the house or taxiing the kids around or just being there in some cases, doing homework, all the things that we do. There was a study that just recently said that mom is worth $162,581 a year.
Wow.
Let that sink in for a second.
162,581. Is that what you said?
Yes. And I know from personal experience what childcare costs, and had situations where clients unfortunately have passed away young, where all too many times, unfortunately. But especially as women, I think we have to, part of the foundation of our house is we have to protect our families. We have to protect our husbands and their ability to continue to lead our families well. And if money's a problem, then that's going to seriously impact their ability to do. And so I'm very passionate about insurance in general. I am not in the business of looking to overinsure anybody. I really look at things based off of need. I don't care what society says about how much you need, quote unquote, to have insurance. I really care about what you need specifically and what is going to make a meaningful impact on your family if you were to pass away early. So so I think it's a real problem. I think it's something that we've got to look at, and we've got to understand. Our situation changes when your kids are young. You need more insurance than you do once they're grown. You've got to factor in things like college planning, and if you're saving for retirement, you also have to understand the impact that your lack of savings might have on your spouse one day. So there's a lot to factor into the equation. Certainly I'm happy to do a needs analysis for anybody that's interested in kind of figuring out, well, do I have enough? Do I not have enough? What else should I be considering?
So I think I shared with you before we came on, right when I had my youngest son, which is 21 years ago, we had one of my husband's best friends, his wife died of cancer 3 months after having her second child. Didn't realize it, went to the hospital for back pain and found out she had cancer that had taken over the bones and everything. She lived a month. So here he was in town without family with a 3-year-old and a 3-month-old. And he had to replace mom at a very emotional, devastated time, right? Because nothing that anybody was expecting. And I remember him having conversations with us about childcare and nanny and house cleaning and homework and cooking and just all those little things, because he had to work, right? He's got to still go to work. Mm-hmm. All those things that it took to take care of the children around that, even if they went to daycare, whatever, there was all this other stuff that needed to be done. And the cost of that just kept adding up and adding up and adding up. And they didn't have insurance. And here I am. I had just had my baby. I think I had my youngest like a week before she passed away.
Wow.
And the first thing they said, he said to us afterwards was, you need go insure Michelle. And at that time, I was working corporate, but I didn't really have a big life insurance policy, and that would have also meant that policy went away if I left that job, which I ended up leaving within the year. And so we went out and worked through that and got insurance very early on to replace me, or not me, but you know what I mean? All the things that I did for the family if something were to happen.
Right.
It breaks my heart for what he went through, because not only did he, lose his best friend and wife, he could have been financially devastated if he had not had people who jumped in and offered to help to fill that need.
Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately, about a third of our country would feel a serious financial impact if they lost the primary wage earner in their family. And so, so statistically, I mean, obviously we're all, it's not a topic we like to talk about. Let's face it. It's hard to talk about. It's hard to think about. But again, I go back to, as caregivers, as women, I think it's just equally important for us to think about protecting our family in ways that only we can.
This year we needed to update our will because our kids are 21 and 24. And we wanted to update our financial plan now that the kids are out. I've got one who's finishing up college, but the other's out. And we met with all of our support, our lawyers, our financial analyst, our accountant. We met with everybody this year and together worked out a plan. I mean, and it was hard, Valerie. It was very hard, especially when we got to the lawyer to do the wills, because he was asking questions that we didn't really want to answer. If I'm honest, the way people feel about looking at their numbers, that's the way I felt. I literally almost felt depressed when I walked out because I was like, I don't want to have to think about that. But my husband and I decided we were going to sit down and think through the hard things because it was for our future. So we sat down and we thought about him. And then we said, and when we're done, we're going to celebrate that we protected the future. So instead of looking at it as gloom and doom, we're going to celebrate that we have at least tried to create a plan. Now, things can happen, but we tried to create a plan. We at least went in with forethought and did what we knew to do in the best way we knew to do it. And that has given us a lot of peace, to believe it or not. Even if it was a difficult process, the peace that has come out of that has been amazing over these last few months.
It's funny you say that, because just last week I sat at someone's kitchen table and I explained to them they didn't have a will, they had young kids. And I'll tell you, I've settled hundreds of estates in my career. And if you don't have a will, run, don't walk, run and get one right now. But they were just intimidated by the whole concept. And what's interesting is, in a simple circumstance, there's really only 4 questions you have to answer in order to do that. They're not as hard as people think. I mean, yes, if you do have kids, you do have to think about guardianship. But outside of that one, that's the one that usually gets most people. The other decisions are not that terrible. And I think that making a decision is better than not making a decision.
It is.
If it's the wrong person, you can always change it. You don't have to just feel like it's the perfect decision. There will never, ever, ever be a perfect person to care for your children. All you've got to really consider is who's going to love my children, who's going to raise my children similarly to how I would raise them. But love, to me, trumps everything else. And so I think if you're stuck in that position and you don't know what to do, think about who's going to love your children, to the extent you would want them to be loved.
Our lawyer said to us when we created our first will, we did it all the way back right after I had my second child, when we did the planning for the insurance, we did our initial will with guardian and who was going to manage our money and how was it going to be spent and if it was going to be held in trust and, all those decisions, because my kids were really little. And I remember him saying to me, because we struggle, who's going to love my children? And he said to me, Michelle, probably just about any family member that you choose is better than giving them up to the state.
Absolutely.
So choose a family member that you love or a best friend that you love that, like you said, that will love your children. It's going to be better for them to be with somebody they know than letting somebody that doesn't know your child decide where they go. And then, just tying it all together it's super important.
It is. It is. I mean, we've talked about a lot of great things here, and I think a lot of it is foundational in nature. But there's also, once you develop that foundation, and once you have the cash reserve, and once you have the budget, and once you're monitoring your expenses, and you've got a good team in place to do, to help tackle all the important areas of financial planning, you also have to think about investments, and you have to think about, are you on track for retirement, and how are you going to handle the sale of your business one day? Who is going to take over your business? Is your business going to die when you die? Those are all things that are forward thinking that you may not be thinking about today, or they may have come up in the last few years. But ultimately, there's so much more than just budgeting. There's just insurance. It is truly a lifelong process that you go through and that you adjust. And when you change, you got to have a team that changes with you.
That is so true. Part of our plan with my company and with the financial advisor was, what was it putting into retirement? How was it going to be a part of our overall financial plan going forward between my husband and I? And then the lawyer and I had the discussion of what happened if something happened to me. Where did my business go? Who owned the business? Who had access to the business? I realized, you ready for this? That even after all these years, my husband's name was not on my accounts for my bank, because I own the company by myself. He's not an owner of the company. And so I had to go to the bank and make sure I could put him on so that if something happened to me, he could get into that account. Now, at that point, it would move over to him, but he had to be able to get into the bank accounts, for goodness sake. And I do this all day, every day, and I had forgotten to take him to the bank and put his name on it. And so now we've been even just cleaning up all of those little kind of things. So I love that you say, Valerie, that it's a process. We're not going to do it all when we first start. I wouldn't have even thought to do that when I first started, because I would have thought, I don't even know if this business is going to be big enough to matter. Yeah. But as it grows, we need to put protections in place for what we're building. The protections come with protecting our money, our finances, our expenses, our priorities, and then protecting our families with all of that, and then protecting our future.
Yeah, the exciting conversation that Rob and I are having right now related to his business is, how do we make this business so profitable, and how do we make it so efficient so that the day you do want to retire, it pays you a paycheck, Rob? How do we do that? And there's ways to do that. There are so many successful people in this industry. I'm on the social media pages. I see people retiring every single day, and they're doing it. They're making a business that is viable and that lives beyond just the day-to-day themselves working in the business. And so, these are exciting conversations to have, and there's so many ideas out there, and you've got to find the one that's right for you. But ultimately, especially for your clients, because I know they're mostly business owners, it's all possible. It's all possible. It's just a matter of thinking through it and making the right decisions for you, the smart decisions for you.
And having a team to help you do that.
Yes.
Right? I mean, I have a team. I've got a business coach. I've got a financial advisor. I've got an accountant. I've got a lawyer. I'm not sitting here doing all this by myself. There's no way. If I did, I wouldn't be where I am.
Yeah. I bet your business coach isn't as good as my business coach.
You do have a really good business coach. Question for you. So what's one of the next big profit goals in your business? And of course, we've defined profit in 1,000 ways. Yeah. So what is it for you?
So right now I'm in the process of looking at my 2019 business plan. I am continually looking to improve structure and accountability for myself, but I'm hoping to really identify clear and measurable goals for this next year. I want to certainly take on some projects related to efficiencies within our office. And then just overall become more, always we could become more financially savvy. So we can always educate ourselves more, even though I'm immersed in this business every single day. I know I can do better. And my motto is, as long as you're putting one foot in front of the other, you're always walking in the right direction. And so for this year, I'm excited because we have a lot of amazing things happen at Grinkmeyer Leonard Financial. And, I'm excited for my clients. A lot of my goal planning has to do with their goal planning. What is it they're trying to achieve? And when I think about my ideal client, when I look at the common denominators between my business, I'm constantly looking to adapt my business to better service them as well. So, yeah.
And I love that, don't you? I think the way that we're profitable is by serving those people that are working with us.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. It's not by taking from them. It's always by serving. One of our conversations a little earlier in the podcast, you were talking about how can I give to them and do for them? That is the same heart that I have for my clients is how can I figure out what my business changes based on what they want and need?
Right.
How can I give them what they want and need? How can I serve them best so that I'm successful when they're successful? And I know you feel the same way.
And it's all about that client experience, especially in a service related business. How do they feel about you when you have completed the job? In my case, it's ongoing. In the interior design world, it's more project oriented, but what is that client feeling? What are they saying to their friends? What is it that they get excited about, that they want to share about their experience? So for me, I have a client service model. I'm like your CPA that you mentioned. I typically meet with all my clients a minimum of twice a year, sometimes 4 to 6 to 8 times a year, depending on the complexity of the circumstances. But I want to make sure that, the services that I provide are on point with exactly what my clients need. And in some cases, you don't want to over deliver. You don't want to, drive your clients crazy with calling them every single day to give them every single update on things they don't need to know about. You want to provide that meaningful amount of service. And so what is that? You've got to know your clients in order to know that. And then also introducing technology into the picture. Let's face it, bringing on business and sales in many respects is a numbers game. So the more people you can touch, the more people more times you can put yourself out there is going to help you. And technology is a great way to do that. There's all kinds of tools and resources. I would say one of the biggest projects that we're going to take on for Shutterlux this year is a customer database, because we need to do a better job of reaching out to our customers once the sale is done or once the project is complete, so that they will continue to remain top of mind for them, and they'll refer their friends and family. And so we're always looking for creative ways to not drive our clients crazy, to not bug our clients with, emails that don't make sense. We just want to stay in front of them and show them that, number one, we care about them. Number two, we are always here when they need us, and we're just a phone call away.
So a couple of resources that I want to throw out for our listeners and for you, Valerie, when you said that. Mike Michalowicz was on episode 4. And of course, he has a lot of different books in there, but he has a new one called Clockwork. And I mentioned it to you, and I want to mention it to everybody else. Of course, you all know I am a lover of e-myth. I know it's overwhelmed some of you, and you told me that you had to fight your way through it because of the systems. But Clockwork is really trying to help you set your business up to run like clockwork so you can retire, walk away, take an extended break. So I would recommend that one. And then when you talked about having a client service model, one of the books, I worked in customer service when I worked for software, my very first job. And I'm telling you, you learn how to take care of those clients. I've also worked as a server in a restaurant. So you can baptism by fire when it comes to that. But there's a really great book called Secret Service by John DeJulius. And it talks about creating a client experience model. And this model says that every time that client comes to see you and works with you, he actually did a lot in the hair care industry and salons, wondering why people came in and worked with a company and then stepped away and didn't come back. Why did they keep going for the cheap haircut or who gives great color instead of going back and letting the same esthetician or whatever hair care specialist work with you? And so he really researched it in that industry, which was very commodity driven, jump. Anyway, he put a model in place and teaches it, but it is a lot of great information that we can use to make sure that we are nurturing that client, that we are serving that client, and that we are joining with other like-minded businesses that have the same client so that we all serve them together. It is a really, really great book. So Secret Service by John DeJulius and Clockwork by Mike.
And speaking of service, as women, how often do we not show our work? How often do we go out there and we do so much work for our clients, but they never understand that or they never appreciate that? And I think it's important. We don't have to get off on that topic today, but show your work. Let them know how much you really care and how much you've done for them.
Right. Many times there's so much we do in the background, especially interior designers, with all those pieces and parts of everything in that whole industry, workrooms, upholsterers, all of them, the details that go into what they do, the client doesn't know it. So if we can identify that value and point it out to them, then by the time we get to the price, it carries a heavier weight. It's a good thing. They're ready to pay you the money because they see the detail. The same in yours. If they think they're just giving you money and you're talking to them twice a year, they don't understand you're working for them the whole time. That's just when you're touching base. And being able to just share what we do behind the scenes does create value that they're paying us for. So I am going to put your Facebook group, Wisdom and Sense, out there. I'm so glad that you have started that and look forward to continuing the conversation there. Tell us where we can find you, Valerie.
Yeah, so you can find me on social media. Facebook, you can look me up, Wisdom and Sense, that's CENTS. I do have a blog, and so you could just Google me, Valerie Leonard, Grinkmeyer Leonard Financial. And gosh, Michelle, this has been great. I just want to reiterate to your listeners that you know your stuff. I mean, you really, truly, truly do. And the interior design industry, the window treatment industry in general, is a much better place because you're in it. And I just, gosh, yeah, Michelle, you have a lot to offer.
Oh, Valerie, thank you so much. You make me happy. I'm going to have to bring you back on just so I can see you smile. But seriously, I do want you to come back because there are other aspects of our personal finances and our business finances that I'd love to dig into and talk to with you. I know you're an expert in that space, and I think it's a conversation that could be layered on top of this one. So can I sign you up to come back?
Absolutely. And anybody out there that has heard something that resonates with them today, reach out to me. I do work remotely. I've got clients all over the country. I am happy to help. And ultimately, I just hope that I can enrich your life with knowledge that truly matters.
Thank you. Well, Valerie, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Michelle.
You're welcome. Everybody, thanks for joining us. Please leave us a review on iTunes. You can join my group to continue the conversation at profitisachoice.club. And remember, profit doesn't happen by accident.